Hello, it's Dr. Cindy with this week's Mental Health Moment. Last week I talked about anger and the responsibility we all have to take care in how we express it. To recap, all feelings are energy and that needs to be attended to and released. Because anger mobilizes us to take action, it tends to be expressed forcefully. It is a secondary emotion that comes in to protect us when we feel threatened or hurt. So if we get caught up in the anger and make that our focus, we can miss the deeper feelings beneath it that are needing attention and care. Venting our anger might give us temporary relief in the moment as we discharge the strong feelings, but that leaves what's really bothering us deep down ignored and neglected. And since our deeper hurt often relates to feeling slighted, unappreciated, or devalued in some way by someone that we care about, coming to them from a place of anger will likely only increase rather than resolve that distance and disconnection we are feeling with them. So let's look in more detail at how we tend to approach interactions with others. First, imagine that you have plans to meet up with a good friend or loved one that you haven't spent time with in a while. You are very much looking forward to seeing them, and just thinking about this puts a smile on your face. While you are getting ready, you reflect on how much you enjoy their company, how nice it will be to talk again, and all of the things that you want to share. As you head out the door, your anticipation turns to excitement, and you can't get there fast enough. You can't wait to give them a big hug and hear all about what has been going on in their life. And when you finally see them, your heart is full of joy. In this scenario, your heart is wide open. You are eager to have conversation with them and will be receptive to whatever they have to share with you. You expect this to be an opportunity for connection, and you actually already feel connected to them before you even meet up after reflecting on those positive aspects of your relationship in anticipation of seeing them again. So you greet them with open arms and an open heart, expressing your affection for them and your enthusiasm about having this time together. Now think about the experience of getting ready to talk to a friend or loved one about being upset with them. You are dreading having this conversation, and just thinking about it gives you a pit in your stomach. Reflect on what it has been like in the past when you've talked about difficult things and replay whatever challenges you experienced in those previous discussions. You think about what you're going to say, how they might react, and that increases the tension you're feeling. You are not looking forward to talking to them because you don't expect it to go well, and you've been putting it off because you really don't want to feel any worse about the situation than you already do. You've prolonged it for as long as you can. Now you brace yourself for a confrontation as you approach them to talk. You really can't wait for it to be over with and hope it doesn't turn into a big argument while worrying that it will. In this case, your heart will be closed. You are not eager to talk to this person, and you expect to have a challenging conversation and possibly even a conflictual confrontation. You already feel distant and more disconnected from them before you even meet up, after mentally revisiting other difficult experiences and interactions you've had and forecasting more of the same for the upcoming discussion. So you approach this conversation with your guard up, ready to protect and defend yourself against a painful encounter with this significant person in your life. It is a natural human tendency to mentally prepare for something significant we are about to participate in. And because of our brain's learning processes and its efforts at efficiency, we draw from past experiences to give us a frame of reference for our next ones, and we'll apply whatever template seems to best match that. So getting ready to meet that dear friend taps into our file of enjoyable experiences with them, and we anticipate more of the same when we get together again. When we're getting ready for a discussion involving challenging feelings, we also prepare for that based on similar experiences we've already had. In this case, those involving tough interactions. While this is efficient, it can predispose us to approach potentially difficult conversations in a way that ends up making them more difficult. When we anticipate that an interaction will be challenging, we brace ourselves for it mentally and emotionally. It's like putting on a suit of armor so that we have some type of buffer or protection from the negative reactions we expect to get from the other person. But suiting up in that way means we're preparing for battle and essentially looking for a fight. How could we get anything but that in return? And as much as we think we are shielding our hearts and protecting ourselves from experiencing more hurt, it only blocks us from connection that could facilitate collaborative conversation and hopefully bring actual resolution and healing for whatever the hurt was. Can you imagine if we could greet our loved ones with open arms and an open heart, even when we are going to have a more challenging conversation with them? A hurtful experience that occurs between people who genuinely care about each other usually involves some type of miscommunication, misperception, or misunderstanding. So it's not about one person doing something wrong, it's about there being something wrong that is causing distance, distress, and discord. If you feel frustrated about coming home to a sink full of dirty dishes, it's tempting to see the dirty dishes as the problem and then pinning that on the person who left them there. But the other person could just as easily see the problem as being your frustration, and that makes it your issue to fix. Now, some of you might be thinking, but people should clean up after themselves. There is no law of the universe pertaining to when and how dirty dishes get taken care of. And for most issues we face in our daily lives, there is more than one way to resolve them. So be careful about shoulds and shouldn'ts, because that means you are imposing your beliefs and values on someone else and setting rules and expectations for their behavior. When we hold other people to rules that we set for them, those are our priorities, but they are not necessarily theirs. And then we will take it extra personally when they break one of those rules. So every time we come home to those dirty dishes, we take that as proof that the other person doesn't care about our feelings. But what if the full sink is actually just a sign of what a busy day they had? If we recognize that, then the situation, while probably still annoying and frustrating, would at least not be perceived as a personal attack. And as much as we might wish that significant others are always keeping our feelings at the forefront of their mind, most of us barely pay attention to our own feelings throughout the course of a typical day, let alone someone else's. So in actuality, the problem in this example is the conflict related to the dirty dishes, which both people are participating in. Issues that cause disagreements are something both people create and contribute to, usually inadvertently, and that is literally coming between them. That makes it a problem for both parties to solve. And what better way to do that than to approach the other person as an ally rather than an adversary? Then, rather than looking for a fight, you would be looking to make things right. There would be no need for armor, ammunition, or weapons of any kind. Just openness to trying to resolve a challenge that is getting in the way of being fully connected to someone you care about. As I talked about in the last video, preparing for meaningful conversation about an upsetting situation starts with taking some time to reflect on the emotional reaction you're having, both the anger and the hurt and other feelings beneath it. This entails connecting with your heart, taking some deep breaths to help clear the intense energy out of your body, and responding with compassion and comfort for how angry and hurt you feel. If you can stick with this and not allow the anger to divert you back to blaming the other person, you will likely discover emotions related to your sense of worth, such as feeling unloved, devalued, unappreciated, disrespected, or unimportant. Those are the feelings that will be important to express to the other person whenever you do have the conversation. But you do still need to first attend to these emotions yourself with care and compassion, so you aren't bringing the full load of your accumulated emotional experiences from the past into the conversation with you. Reflect on what part of how you are feeling truly relates to whatever is going on right now between you and the other person, and commit to only bringing that into the discussion with them as much as possible. The next part of this work can be even more challenging, and that is preparing how you are going to communicate your feelings. When I work with people on how to approach a significant other about something they have strong emotions about, they often tell me that there's no point because they already know exactly what the other person will say. They then tell me they've had the same conversation many times and can essentially provide a verbal transcript for me about how that conversation goes. However, it is absolutely impossible to have the exact same conversation with another person if you choose to say things differently. Yet that's not what usually happens. What we tend to do is rehash in our minds how we think the conversation will go based on how it's gone before. We get all worked up and angry again as we experience the frustration of an unresolved conflict. Then we either give up on having the conversation altogether because we don't want to go through that aggravation again, or we go into it armed and ready to fight the fight. Both of those stances perpetuate the anger related to the situation without bringing any relief or resolution to the perceived problem. If you have done the initial work of tending to your own anger, hurt, and all the other underlying emotions, that will already help you imagine how you might participate in the conversation differently, because you won't be approaching it with all of those hurt feelings. That means you will be better able to speak about the hurt rather than from the hurt. You might want to review Mental Health Moments number 14 and 15 on speaking from the heart and listening with the heart for a refresher on specific language and other communication skills. In thinking about how to initiate the conversation, the goal is to present it as openly and collaboratively as possible. So you're going to scrap the old script and no longer rehearse your lines and then act out that same scene for the umpteenth time. Instead, use that script as important information for where communication has tended to break down in the past. If you feel that you keep going around in circles when you try to talk about something, you probably are. When you have the same conversation over and over again, it is important to look at what is happening that is perpetuating the conflict rather than bringing it to resolution. Then you can hopefully make changes in what you say and do to stop that merry-go-round and get off of that ride. It can help to actually draw a circle and delineate how the conversation spirals into a never-ending loop that keeps us stuck in the same disagreement. Start with whatever the argument is about and how you present it to the other person. How you frame the problem is the starting point. If you see the problem as dirty dishes in the sink, that will likely lead to an approach focused on the other person's behavior, and the conversation leads nowhere except coming home to find more dirty dishes in the sink again. Restate the problem as the arguing over the dirty dishes and see how that can change what you say to initiate the conversation. The goal in creating a new way of talking about this is to break out of the communication pattern that takes you through another round of arguing about the dishes. Look at the connection between the things you've said in these discussions, how the other person typically responds, and then how you've reacted to that. If you lay it out step by step, you can often discover all of the points where the conversation goes astray. And those are also opportunities to interrupt the cycle and say things differently so it doesn't end up going where it always does, right back to still disagreeing about the problem. So if, for example, the other person tends to respond defensively to your efforts to communicate, consider that you might be saying things in an accusatory or blaming way. If you're criticizing them for their behavior or telling them they've done something wrong, you are setting the stage for conflict rather than collaboration. Rewrite your lines so that you are focusing on yourself and your own feelings rather than on them and their behavior. So as you consider how to present the perceived problem, instead of, all you ever do at night is watch TV, or why don't you take care of your own dishes? You might say, I feel lonely at night when you watch TV, or I feel frustrated when I come home to dirty dishes in the sink. Then add, that makes me feel upset and distant towards you, and I don't like feeling that way. Are you willing to help me figure out how we can resolve this together? Now, if you've gotten defensive responses in the past, even when objectively you have not been blaming or accusatory, examine those reactions for more information about sensitivities or vulnerabilities that the other person might struggle with. Remember, there are 4 parts to communication. There's what you intend to say and what you actually say, and then there's what the other person hears and how they interpret it. Your responsibility is to say what you mean in as clear and non-blaming a way as you can, and then to clarify what you are trying to communicate if the other person does not seem to have received or interpreted the message accurately or in the way that it was intended. So if I feel frustrated when I come home to dirty dishes in the sink is met with, I do a lot around here too, or you always find something I haven't done right. Your significant other is mishearing your comment as an indictment of their level of contribution to household tasks. Now, that might be based on previous arguments where that has come up as an issue, or it could just be coming from their own insecurities and sensitivity to anything that sounds as though they are inadequate in some way. In either case, consider how you can respond to that in a collaborative and connecting way rather than falling into old patterns of reacting negatively to their defensiveness. That might involve expressing acknowledgement and appreciation for how much they do contribute around the house, and then clarifying that you really are only wanting to work together to come up with a solution for this specific issue related to the dishes. If conversations tend to get sidetracked, that probably means one or both of you are trying to give evidence to support your position. If you treat this as a trial and approach each other as opposing sides, you will find yourselves presenting your case, calling on witnesses, and bringing in exhibits. Whenever that happens, it is important to halt that process as quickly as possible. Remember that you are on the same side, working together to address a problem that has been coming between you. Now, this can be challenging because it is natural to want to respond in kind when the other person is bringing up examples of what they perceive to be your shortcomings or flaws. But each of those comments is like a piece of kindling being added to a fire, and the more you put on it, the more likely it is that it will blaze out of control. So if you're trying to talk about the dishes in the sink and the other person starts giving examples of all the times that you didn't clean up after yourself, do not try to defend your honor or bring out your own list of grievances against them. Instead, you can simply say, "Oh, I hear that you have some concerns about me, and I really want to talk to you about those. Right now, though, I'd like to focus on what we can come up with just to resolve this disagreement about the dirty dishes." If, despite your best efforts, the conversation escalates into bigger conflict, it may be time to take a break. We each have to learn that line within ourselves where the anger is at such a level that we are at risk of speaking or acting in hurtful ways. If you feel you are approaching that danger zone, it is crucial to let the other person know that you need some time to regroup. And take the time and space to connect again with your heart and comfort yourself through the difficult feelings. Too often when we take a break from an argument, we go to our separate corners, prepare for the next round, and then come out swinging again. This is not a time to refine your argument so you can more effectively convince the other person to see things your way when you go to talk to them again. If you're feeling that the other person isn't understanding what you're trying to say, it is very likely that they are feeling the same way about you. So consider what they are trying to communicate to you and how you might express your understanding of that to them. If you can re-enter the conversation with a reflection on where the other person is coming from, you can reestablish yourself as an ally and partner who's trying to work through difficulty rather than an adversary looking to defeat them. And I would suggest that you are not ready to go have the conversation unless and until you can connect to the love you have for the other person and the desire you have for reconciliation with them. Can you remember that the person in the other room or on the other end of the phone is someone that you have chosen to have in your life because they are special and important to you? People who care about each other don't want to be upset and angry with one another. And if you are hurting, they are hurting too. Since neither of you wants to be going through this, that in and of itself gives you common ground to work from. When we can have compassion for ourselves and the other person when challenges arise, we are much more likely to be able to engage in collaborative conversation that leads to reconnection and reconciliation rather than combative confrontation that perpetuates disconnection and disagreement. That means coming to the table with an open heart and a genuine desire to heal the hurt between you and the person that you love. That's it for this week. Take care. See you next week.